Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Magic. Today we're going to talk about Myr. Now, I feel like I have to put a disclaimer in here. What I talk about in this video are concepts, and are not super fleshed out or anything. Moving on, Myr are like these semi-sentient robot guys that all look like sad cashews. From the plane of Mirrodin, what's known as Argentum. They were created by the Memnarch, Mirrodin's guardian. Memnarch was originally a golem created by Karn, but he was corrupted by Phyrexian oil and became paranoid and created the Myr as surveillance drones, laborers, enforcers, or otherwise extensions of his will. He spent centuries abducting beings from across the multiverse and reshaping Mirrodin to prepare his ascension as a planeswalker. Using the Darksteel Eye, Memnarch could see through the eyes of every Myr simultaneously. Because of this, Memnarch achieved an impressive awareness of the Mirrodin plane. Each Myr had a special purpose. Mana Myr, so Memnarch could ramp; Combat Myr, like Myr Enforcer, the police force to suppress the peaceful protesters; and Utility Myr, like Myr Propagator, which supports other constructs. Karn returned to Mirrodin and realized what Memnarch had become. Karn stripped him of control over Mirrodin and took back the Mirari. But plot twist, Karn didn't realize that he had been corrupted by the Phyrexian oil, and when he reclaimed the Mirari and reset the plane of Mirrodin, he corrupted Mirrodin with the Phyrexian oil even further. Karn departed Mirrodin once again, and with Memnarch gone, Mirrodin was left unguarded. Well, anyway, the Phyrexian oil began mutating and infecting Myrian life, creating a new Phyrexian hierarchy, and transforming Mirrodin into what would become New Phyrexia. The Myr are definitely a creature-type matters kind of thing, but they have another fun perk to them. They are artifact matters as well. A lot of people don't know about Ruling 34, which is a rule specifically for Myr creatures. You can look up MTG Rule 34 to learn more. Anyway, let's take a look at Urtet, Remnant of Memnarch, the OG Myr commander. Urtet is a 3 generic 2/2 with, whenever you cast a Myr spell, create a 1/1 colorless Myr artifact creature token. At the beginning of combat on your turn, untap each Myr you control, and Wooburg, tap, put 3 +1/+1 counters on each Myr you control. Activate only on your turn. Urtet allows you to create a bunch of Myr tokens, buff them up, and ramp like crazy. Not only that, but it's a 5-color commander. You can use Aggravated Assault, Intruder Alarm, Unwinding Clock, and Myr Galvanizer to repeatedly untap your Myr. Urtet is from the Phyrexia All Will Be One set. He's basically a surviving piece of Memnarch's Myr network, a self-directed Myr overseer. Urtet carries the memory of Memnarch. He carries his architecture, his logic, his purpose, just without the madness. After the fall of Memnarch and the rise of New Phyrexia, most constructs from the Mirrodin era were either corrupted or destroyed. Urtet was one of the few who survived, and retained the original Mirrodin programming. He acts as a stabilizer of Mirrodin's old systems, and has an understanding of the artificial ecosystem. Urtet is the last spark of Mirrodin's original identity. Let's say Urtet tries to reclaim New Phyrexia. He could rally the Myr, restore lost systems, and rebuild Mirrodin. We'll call this Urtet variant Urtet Matrix Unifier. Now, I may not be an artist, but I'd rather take the time drawing the cards myself than using AI to do it, so don't mind if it looks weird. I think we should go with a Myr tribal approach, just like the original Urtet, except with a Joda the Unifier twist. Urtet can be a 5 generic 2/2 legendary artifact creature with something like the base power and toughness of other Myr you control is XX, where X is the number of other Myr you control. And whenever you cast a Myr spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a Myr card of lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana value. Put the cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. Alright, so I think this is already pretty strong for a tribal approach, but there's still one problem. Myr are known for the ramp, and because Urtet is colorless right now, you wouldn't be able to use half of the Myr mana dorks. I was thinking of a Wooburg ability for Urtet, but his abilities are already very long. And what does Wizards of the Coast do when it wants to add another ability but doesn't have room? That's right, it becomes a Transformer. Transformers! More than meets the eye. I think this is a good idea, especially because transformed cards were popular in the March of Machines set, which was the continuation of All Will Be One. I'm proposing we add a transform clause at the end of the unifier ability, just a simple transform Urtet after the part about casting that spell for free. The March of Machines Transformers were sagas on the back, but if we did that for Urtet, you would lose his power and toughness ability. But let's think about it. Theme-wise, the saga makes the most sense, so that's what I chose to do. But first I thought we should fix that static ability on the front of the card. The easy fix is to make it an emblem. So we'll change the first ability to, when Urtet, Matrix Unifier, enters the battlefield, you get an emblem with the base power and toughness of Myr you control is equal to the number of Myr you control. Now that that's fixed, let's move on to the saga side. Now I'm sure you already know what sagas do. You put a counter on it when it enters and your draw step. When it gets to 3 it ends. In the case of double faces, you usually just transform it back to the front face. The saga will be called The Return of Mirrodin. But anyway, ability number 1 would be something like exile all non-artifact creatures until the Return of Mirrodin leaves the battlefield. Ability number 2 would be create a 1/1 colorless Myr artifact creature token and put a +1/+1 counter on each Myr you control. And ability number 3 is, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add Wooburg, exile the Return of Mirrodin, then return it to the battlefield front face up. Is it balanced? I don't know. The thought behind this is Urtet, of course, is fighting a powerful enemy, the Phyrexians. It's not like you expect Urtet to body slam Elishnorn, but everything in Mirrodin is engineered to stop the Phyrexian corruption. It was a constructed plan, not a natural one, meaning that everything from its mana flow to its terrain was engineered. Mycosynth is the material that makes everything on Mirrodin metal, but corrupted by glistening oil. Memnarch could control the Mycosynth, and since Phyrexian oil interacts with mana and metal, it meant being in control of the Mycosynth was a major defensive advantage. But when Memnarch fell, Mirrodin's artificial terrain became the perfect host for the spread of Phyrexian corruption. The Myr were surveillance drones, repair drones, environmental monitors, and mana flow regulators. Urtet is explicitly described as a Myr coordinator, and if he could reactivate the Myr network, he could map Phyrexian corruption, gain control of Myr manufacturing, and awaken hidden Myr reserves. Then if Urtet could regain control over the Mycosynth, Urtet can choke off Phyrexian oil pathways and seal off corrupted zones, essentially cutting off the supply of oil to the Phyrexian predators. And once Urtet was in full control, Urtet could use the environmental reset protocols to purge the Phyrexian corruption entirely. The only problem, Mirari, the core of Memnarch, was taken back by Karn, but the interfaces remained. If Urtet could find the old access ports and rebuild the partial connections, Urtet could trigger a partial reset of the plane. It wouldn't be a full reset, but it would be enough to sever the Praetor's influence. And once that was done, Urtet could awaken millions of dormant Myr and lead a Myr uprising against the Phyrexians. Myr don't feel fear, they don't rebel, and they never stop. They're the perfect swarm army. That brings us to our next card, Mycosynth Wake. It would be a 6-cost enchantment with a stacks ability, kind of like how Urtet uses the Mycosynth to disrupt the Phyrexian Scourge. The ability would be, all non-basic lands become wastes, and lose all other types and abilities. Wastes have tap add 1 colorless. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. This is meant to reflect Urtet taking control over the Mycosynth and using it as a way to disrupt the Phyrexian supply lines, as well as combining the ability to use mana as mana of any color from Mycosynth Lattice. On the other note, we can do something to tell the tale of the wasting of Mirrodin. Another enchantment called Waste Pact. This enchantment would be like Grave Pact, but for artifacts. Whenever an artifact you control dies, each opponent sacrifices an artifact. In the wastelands of New Phyrexia, many constructs lay dormant. The razor grass fields were once chrome plains, and now graveyards of Myr litter the plain. Waste Pact is basically saying if one of my artifacts dies, one of your artifacts goes with it, because everything wastes away in New Phyrexia. It would be a 4 generic enchantment, but in my opinion, not as powerful as Grave Pact, because most decks don't actually use that many artifacts, but it could potentially be broken in some way that I haven't thought about. But enough of the enchantments. We're here for the Myr, right? Most Myr are already cemented in the lore. There's not much room to add more. Myr were mostly just mindless drones, but what we can do is have Myr token generators to reenact the Myr uprising. We can have a sorcery called Myr Swarm, where it's X 1 generic, red, and you put X 1/1 colorless Myr artifact creature tokens onto the battlefield. Simple, right? Well, next we can do a token factory, like an underground Myr reserve. So artifact, let's say 5 generic. It would say something like, during each of your opponent's combat phase, for each creature that player controls that's attacking you or a planeswalker you control, create a 1/1 colorless Myr artifact creature token blocking that creature if able. It's basically waves of tiny Myr meant to erode and overwhelm the Phyrexian forces. It's kinda similar to Ensnaring Bridge, where it's meant to prevent opponents from attacking you, and if you combo it with Urtet Matrix Unifier's static ability, each of those Myr get exponentially more beefy for each other Myr on the battlefield. Combine Myr Stockpile with Trove of Temptation, Grave Pact, and or Waste Pact. Then you have a pretty deadly combo going on. Right now, Myr Tribal has 2 real problems that we haven't solved yet. Graveyard Recursion and a win con. Myr has Myr Battlesphere, which is great, but it's not enough on its own, and Myr Retriever, which needs cards outside of Tribal to loop. What if we had something that covered both? How, you ask? Myr Scrap Forger. Myr Scrap Forger is a repurposed Myr, reprogrammed to weld Myr corpses together. It can be a 2/2 artifact creature. Myr Scrap Forger would have an ability that lets it recur Myr cards, of course. Think something like tap, exile 2 artifact creatures from your graveyard, create a 1/1 colorless Myr Scrapling artifact creature token with this creature has all abilities of the exiled cards, and when this creature dies, return the exiled cards to their owner's graveyard. That's not all. What if it had another ability? 1 generic, sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Myr Scrap Forger. Myr Scrap Forger would allow you to loop Battlesphere, recur Myrs, or beef Scrap Forger up like crazy, and for an ability like this, it's gotta be like a 5 cost. I tried to include lore behind all of these custom cards, but of course the Phyrexians had been defeated by the end of the Phyrexian storyline. Perhaps Memnarch would rebuild Meriden in the aftermath, or maybe the Phyrexians would somehow return. Well, I think that's about it for Reimagining Myr. What did you guys think? Let me know if you guys want to see more Reimagining Magic videos. If you'd like to watch more magic related videos, feel free to subscribe. Good luck, and you're welcome.